Hawaii's fight for statehood has been pressed continuously ever since. In the 40 years since annexation, Hawaiian taxpayers have paid $150 million into the United States Treasury, in excess of what the federal government has appropriated for Hawaii. 81% of the 400,000 odd residents are native born. A large percentage then in California or New York. Further, Hawaii is considerably ahead of many states in its social conditions. Agriculture labor on the sugar plantations, for instance, receive a higher compensation than is paid agriculture labor on the average in the rest of the United States. Child labor has not been permitted for years. As a customer of the mainland of the United States, Hawaii ranks 5th among the nations of the world and tops 13 foreign country customers, including Mexico, Cuba, Belgium, Italy, Australia, Argentina, Brazil, China, Sweden, and British India. Its annual purchases are more than double those of gigantic China with its 400 million potential customers. Hawaii therefore believes that it is entitled to be the 49th state, feeling that it's just as much a part of the United States as any state on the mainland. As for size, it is larger than Connecticut, Rhode Island, or Delaware. Its population is greater than that of Delaware, Nevada, or Wyoming, and almost as large as that of Idaho, New Mexico, or New Hampshire. Thus, neither size nor population holds Hawaii out of the flag's field of stars. Besides, Hawaii had cost the United States nothing. Whereas every other possessions did, either in blood or gold. The Louisiana purchase was $3,750,000, an almost astronomical figure back in 1804. The accession of Florida from Spain in 1819 was thought worth $5 million. The grandstand purchase cost $15 million. Following the Mexican War of 1848, by which was ceded with now southern Arizona and part of New Mexico. Alaska was purchased from Russia for $7,200,000 in 1867, and under the Treaty of December 10, 1898, the United States paid Spain $20 million for her relinquish of all claims to the Philippines, Puerto Rico, and Guam. While under a later treaty, the United States paid Spain an additional $100,000 for the outlying Philippines island. For the Danish West Indies, St. Croix, St. Thomas, and St. John, now known as the Virgin Islands, the United States paid $25 million. These tiny Caribbean dots, with a population of 23,000, have since been described as the poorhouse of America. most of the islanders being on further relief, and the island's trade, incidentally, is mostly with Denmark. Hawaii knows that it is the Japanese problem that is barring the islands from statehood. Despite a decrease in the alien Japanese population and increase in island-born Japanese, the argument is that if granted statehood, the Hawaiians might send Japanese to the governor's mansion, the House of Representatives in Washington, and possibly the Senate itself. This argument hardly jives with our much flaunted democratic idea. Flaunted democratic idea. Hawaii does not deny that there is a preponderance of Japanese in the islands. It is proud of its Japanese population and points out that since 1924, when Japan instituted a dual citizenship law by which everyone of Japanese blood born aboard could be registered at the consulate as a subject of the Mikado, the great majority of Japanese have ignored the ruling. The second generation of Hawaiian-born Japanese became Americanized in speech and in custom, scorned Japanese clothes, took up baseball. Those who had the money and who had been intruded by their parents' stories of Japan went there and then hurried back, score at heart that they had been treated as foreigners rather than as Japanese in Japan. It is obvious then that the third generation of Japanese in Hawaii is Americanized as possible. Japanese language schools have been reduced a great deal in number. Testifying before a subcommittee of the House Committee on the Territories in Honolulu in 1935, Orrin E. Long, Superintendent of Public Instructions of the Territorial School, said, "Our youth have a growing appreciation of our American institution. They are conscious of their citizenship and take pride in it. I am certain of this. No greater compliment can be paid to them than to think of them as Americans. No greater institute than a question their loyalty." The subcommittee on territories meeting at the Senate chambers of Iolani Palace, the Capitol building of Hawaii, antipathetic, what's his word? Antipathetic.
Pathetic.
Antipathetic ears to Hawaii's statehood plea in 1935. Why? Surf riders battling the combers of Waikiki Beach drew the congressmen, so did the hula dancers and the business of eating poi and pit and fish cooked in underground ovens. The mighty minds of Washington had been delighted with everything, but they had seen too many Japanese. Not only had they seen Japanese, but they had heard a lot of adverse criticism about them, that they were all spies, working as servants on the army post and at Navy bases, that the Emperor of Japan had secretly enrolled them as members of an army which, at the word of alarm, would seize the islands, that those who were not employed at Army Navy posts were equipped to poison the water supply and do other drastic deeds, including the disembowelment of all non-Japanese. The congressmen sailed back to the American mainland and reported thumbs down on statehood for Hawaii. Meanwhile, the city of Los Angeles thought it had a solution. Excuse me. If Hawaii wanted to become a part of the United States, the simplest thing to do was to incorporate it as part of the city of Los Angeles. That city, which had just succeeded in becoming a seaport by the expedient of annexing San Pedro, 40 odd miles away, and which already included some vast desert stretches, was then advertising itself as the biggest city in the world. The inclusion of Hawaii, 2,100 miles away, would, the Los Angeles thought, add considerably to its tourist bureau promotion list, which could include Waikiki Beach, 14 volcanoes, the prospect of skiing down Mauna Loa, 13,675 feet, the highest peak in the world, into the tropical plains, and surfboard riding off treacherous White Queens Beach. But Hawaii was unimpressed by the Los Angeles invitation. It had distinguished of its own. Honolulu is geographically the biggest city in the world. Midway Island, 1,000 miles westward, being incorporated within the city and county of Honolulu, Hawaii rejected the California offer with few thanks. It wanted to become a state. On June 9, 1938, delegates Samuel Wilder King introduced a bill in Congress to enable the people of Hawaii to enact a constitution, form a state government, and be admitted into the Union on an equal footing with the original states. In August 1937, both the House and Senate adopted a resolution for the appointment of a committee of 12 senators, 12 representatives, to conduct a comprehensive study of statehood and other subjects relating to the welfare of Hawaii. They found the territory to be a modern unit of the American Commonwealth, with a political, social, and economic structure of the highest type. 67 witnesses, the majority of whom favored statehood, testified. Due to the strategic location of Hawaii, the islands are of prime importance from a military standpoint, and as they are well fortified, a hostile country could not capture them except at the very highest expense. The Army is building its forces up to a strength of 25,000 officers and men, while the naval forces consists of approximately 4,000 officers and enlisted personnel. It costs annually about $35 million to maintain the defense of Hawaii. It was the Japanese question again that arose in the course of the hearings on statehood. Those opposing the idea cited the fact that the Japanese would probably be a menace to the safety of the country, where it was reported that they were ready to organize their own army and conduct an internal war at the back door of the forts themselves. Testifying in favor of statehood and terming the Japanese menace absurd, Louis S. Kane, superintendent of public works for the territory, summed up the Japanese problem thus: "In this discussion, the word Japan is not commonly used, but it is such common knowledge that we might as well use it. There is no other Oriental power which would have significant strength even to dream of such a thing." I would like to discuss a rather divergent, but what I consider a practical view of that question. Japan is the only major power not Caucasian. Now, Japan has suffered from race, prejudice, and discrimination more than any other power. She knows what it is to well. She knows what it is to well. She knows better than we do the futility of even so much as considering occupying the west coast of the United States and running it as a colony of Japan. It would be too impractical. It will not work. She knows that better than we do too. And the islands themselves are not worth the major conflict their conquest would participate. I am urging the temperance of the military hysteria over fear of attack by Japan on these islands. I am content the great numbers of us here have no fear of secret and organized societies of Japanese whose object is to rise up and take the islands for Japan. We who live here and know these people have no fear on the question of dual citizenry of the Americans of Japanese ancestries. I have never heard any question raised as to the dual citizenship of British, French, or certain other nationalities. The discussion of Japanese in the islands recalled an interesting historical fact that in 1881, King Kalakaua, on a voyage around the world, was the guest of the Emperor Matsuhito. In the course of a secret interview, a matrimonial alliance between the Japanese imperial family and the royal Hawaiian family was proposed, and the king suggested that his niece, Princess Kaiulani, and heir to the throne, would wed into the Japanese house. At that time, Princess Kaiulani was only 6 years old, and the Japanese prince whom the king had in mind was a youth of 15 and a student at a Japanese naval academy. The Japanese emperor declined the proposition so as not to aid in any scheme which might impair the sphere of the American influence over Hawaii. At that time, the king Kalakaua was fearful regarding the future of his kingdom in the face of increasing Oriental population. Thank you. Not for